Welcome back to Outside the Box. I'm your host, Margot. You're tuned into MK Ultra's Project Phoenix, or the Phoenix program. We have been covering MK Ultra and the true reason for its existence, and of course its subsidiary programs such as Operation Midnight Climax, Project Paperclip, Artichoke, Bluebird, and now we are at the Phoenix program. So this particular program was labeled the Civilian Assassination Program, and if you tuned into any of my other episodes, I think it is Project Paperclip. They were also labeled as an assassination program for civilians, which is really odd, but that's one of the reasons why MK Ultra has such a terrible reputation. However, the Phoenix program, in my opinion, is one of the worst programs in history, just like many other CIA programs during the time of establishing methods of military provisions that of course are necessary to keep America safe, and a safe way to implement whatever actions that are needed in certain situations when it comes to covert operations, military, and government secrets. This specific program was designed to identify and destroy Viet Cong via infiltration, assassination, torture, capture, counterterrorism, and interrogation. And of course, a lot of MK Ultra's programs are pretty much centered around interrogation and so on and so forth. So Phoenix was initially coordinated by the Central Intelligence Agency during the Vietnam War. The program lasted from 1968 to 1972. Of course, this was involving American and South Vietnamese militaries and a small number of Special Forces operatives from the Australian Army training team in Vietnam. So, of course, this was during the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War lasted 20 years. My God, they were fighting all this time. So, anywho. In 1970, the CIA was phased out due to their extreme interrogation methods, and Phoenix was put under the authority of the Civil Operations and Revolutionary Development Support Program, which is acronym CORDS. I don't know if you guys have seen like those patches on like usually disabled vets and people that belong to like the lodges and stuff like that. For some reason, just like a couple of other MK Ultra programs, they felt they required the local support within non-combat civilian populations in order to properly infiltrate North Vietnam. So it's like going into just a regular neighborhood and trying to gather intelligence, I guess, on, we'll get into that later. There's more to it to this particular program, and you will see why. But they felt like they needed the help of non-combat civilian populations. So throughout the program, 81,740 people suspected of South Vietnamese Communist Guerrilla Force membership. Now this is Viet Cong, okay? They're the South Vietnamese Communist Guerrilla Force. So 81,000 people were suspected of being a member of the VC, again, which is the South Vietnamese Communist Guerrilla Force combative team, or however you want to put it. So 26,369 were killed, and the rest surrendered or captured. 87% of those who were killed were due to conventional military operations by South Vietnamese and American forces, while the remaining 13% of the Phoenix program were Phoenix operatives. So it's kind of mixed up. You almost have to feel your way through. So I feel like when I did my research, it's like Americans are on both sides, so the North against the South of Vietnam. But like I said, reading this in my research, which is accurate, it's saying American forces as well as South Vietnamese forces they joined together. So, written in July 1963, CIA's Kubrick Interrogation Manual was implemented during the Vietnam War. Of course, tactical methods were enforced by none other than the CIA, U.S. military, Australian military, and South Vietnamese forces, which is the Viet Cong. Brutal and physical violence that included numerous inhumane procedures that included insertion, of a 6-inch dowel into a prisoner's ear canal and tapping it through the brain until death and also starvation. Electronic shock gear, such as field telephones, used to shock individuals into submission with wires attached to sensitive areas like the genitals. So field telephones are used for the military, like it's battery operated, and I read somewhere that sometimes they don't even need the battery. It, like, I guess harnesses energy from like the earth or whatever, I don't know, but sometimes it doesn't even need a battery. So this is to communicate to back and forth between superiors and regular GIs, right? That's what a field telephone is. But we felt the need to use it as a weapon, so they would shock individuals like in attaching this phone to their genitals. So psychological torture, this made the victim feel responsible for their suffering. This was to break their will, often using phrases like, you're just making it worse for yourself, which of course would be shifting the blame. Human experimentations, this was held at the Ben Hoa Mental Hospital. This is in Viet Cong prisoners were subjected to extreme and ultimately fatal electroshock therapy. 60 shocks per day for a week. In some rare cases, electrodes were implemented in captives' brains. So all this is during the 60s and 70s, 1968 to 1972. But of course, I believe it started in the 40s. So to me, CIA, MK Ultra, all these things, this covert operations, we're still trying to find the correct method of what can we do to keep America safe? Because remember, our GIs came back blank, right? When they went to Korea, when they fought in the Korea War in the Ukraine, they came back blank canvases because, of course, they were ahead of us. So they knew the tactic of brainwashing. So all this is doing is evolving. So we're still experimenting on different things. And then, of course, we had that mad scientist syndrome, the HU in human, the creativeness that we have. And we feel like, oh, if we do this, we need a little bit more of this. And, of course, again, it got out of control during this time. So 60s and 70s. So we go back to the 40s. These are generational. So it's carrying on. Eugenics is still in the mix when it comes to psychological and scientific methods and experiments. So it was still early on. The program was primarily an assassination program. Many people were summarily executed or thrown from helicopters to intimidate others. So in my further research, so you know, war, everything is getting bombed, the buildings are getting knocked down, all these things. So you have all this underdeveloped land. So further in my research, it's saying the Phoenix program was to neutralize enemy forces designed to stabilize regions, to begin clearing insurgent units, securing areas with local forces, and finally developing infrastructure and supporting local governance. So of course, America needed a piece of the pie. Okay, so this is like nothing but land now. So we fought, we've done this, we had to go ahead and put our flag or our mark on whatever we wanted to develop and have our economy, generating. So that's usually what we're always fighting for, right? Land. So anyway, I'd like to thank you for tuning into Outside the Box. I'm sorry I had a lot of things going on. I know I said once a week, but I'm here now. Please like and subscribe. Stay safe and informed.